This is 5 on 20 News with Luke Goodhart. It's Wednesday, April 5th, and we're coming to you live from our studios in downtown Tucson. Before we get to the headlines today, on behalf of the entire Creative Tucson family, I'd like to bid a warm, albeit bittersweet, bon voyage to our very own Sean Madrid, who at this moment is in Germany pursuing a graduate program in media arts. Congratulations, Sean. We wish you the best, but we're all totally depressed that you're not around. Now, before I start crying confusing tears of joy and heartache, here's the local headlines. Despite Arizona's plentiful sunshine, the state lags behind the rest of the country in terms of solar energy growth, according to a recent report. The Solar Foundation's 2016 National Jobs Census found that Arizona experienced a 6% rise in solar jobs, but this was compared to a 25% increase across the nation. The state's 7,310 jobs ranked 7th in the country, according to the census. While the number looks good, this followed a drop of almost 2,000 solar jobs in 2015 when utility companies began new charges for solar-powered homes, which lowered demand in the state. Harvey Bryan, a senior sustainability scientist at the University of Arizona, says that we used to be number 2 behind California, but that we've lagged in recent years. Bryan, along with others, blames changes to net metering rules, which allowed solar customers to receive credits for extra energy. In 2015, utilities began charging a fee for solar customers, which caused the industry to collapse in Arizona. Bryan says that utility companies such as SRP, quote, literally killed rooftop solar. But an SRP spokesman said that the new pricing scheme covers the toll that solar customers put on the energy grid, which they still need to use on cloudy days and at night. Ed Gilliland, senior director at the Solar Foundation, said that these net metering programs help to grow solar and is now available in 45 states. He says that states such as Massachusetts and Vermont are encouraging growth with solar, even though they're not considered centers of solar power. Massachusetts added 14,000 solar jobs last year, which was second in the country behind California, who added over 100,000 solar jobs in 2016. Overall, there are about 260,000 new solar jobs across the country, which tripled the amount from the previous year. Despite the low ranking in Arizona, the Solar Foundation expects the state's solar industry to see an increase of 17% this year. That is until Trump decides to block the sun in order to drive more business towards coal. The next president of the University of Arizona is looking to rake it in. Dr. Robert C. Robbins will receive a total of $988,000 over 3 years, making him the highest earning university president in the state's history. Robbins will take over June 1st, following Ann Weaver Hart, who will continue to receive her still not so bad $670,000 pay package until June 2018. This means that the U of A will spend over $1.6 million just on presidential compensation next year. Robbins comes from being CEO of Texas Medical Center, where he made over $1.2 million per year. He said in a Daily Star interview that he was willing to take a, quote, major pay cut in taking the position. How selfless of him. He also said in the interview that he has, quote, never been really motivated by money. And he said this with a straight face. Nope, he's motivated by free meals from the food court Panda Express. Current and former students intended to protest Robbins' sky-high pay, but they were too busy working 3 jobs to pay their student loan debt. Another top TUSD administrator has resigned at a time when the school district is going through a dizzying amount of changes. Karen Kopech, deputy superintendent of TUSD, tendered her resignation last week. She worked in Texas with former superintendent H.T. Sanchez, who was removed from his position in February. The TUSD governing board is still searching for a replacement for Sanchez and installed Gabriel Trujillo to temporarily run the district. TUSD's HR head Anna Maiden also resigned recently, while General Counsel Todd Yeager and Assistant Superintendent Abel Morado are finalists for the open superintendent spot in the Amphi School District. The board almost had a replacement superintendent in Maggie Schaefer, but she later withdrew her name after a Tucson Sentinel report found that the governing board violated open meeting rules. The board hadn't scheduled a notice that they were negotiating a deal with Terry Melendez, who was to be offered the deputy superintendent position. According to open meeting rules, the board must put all plans for appointments on the meeting agenda. Since that issue, the board has had a difficult time finding applicants for the position. Sanchez was pushed out after a series of controversies involving the district's desegregation plan, budget shortfalls, and declining enrollment. When he was ousted, board members signed a gag order agreeing that they wouldn't make derogatory comments aimed at Sanchez. This means that they can't discuss the exact reasons why they pushed for his resignation. But rumors have floated around that the real reason was because Sanchez wasn't crazy about the movie La La Land and thought Lemonade was just okay. It's official. Sheriff Joe Arpaio's tent cities are no more. Current Sheriff Paul Penzoni announced yesterday that he will close the controversial tent cities where Arpaio housed his prisoners. Penzoni said in a press conference that, quote, "Starting today, the circus ends and the tents come down." He said that the facility did not work as a crime deterrent, was not cost-effective, and not tough on criminals. Penzoni said that while the tent cities were supposed to intimidate criminals, it became more of a circus atmosphere and attracted unwanted attention. Arpaio's tent cities were criticized when it was discovered that prisoners housed in the tents were subjected to temperatures of over 145 degrees, with many with fans that didn't work. Penzoni said that the closing of the tent cities would save the county about $4.5 million per year, about half the entire cost to run the jail. Over 700 prisoners who inhabited the tents will be transferred to either the Estrella or Durango jails. Some will be moved in the next 45 to 60 days, but for others it may take months to find a proper place. Penzoni also said that the 86 people who work at the tent city wouldn't lose their jobs but would be transferred to other departments. The decision came after Penzoni ordered a 12-person committee to study the tent cities to see if they were worth keeping. The committee toured the tent cities and unanimously decided that, unsurprisingly, it was the dumbest thing they'd ever seen. Despite past comments disparaging Arpaio, Penzoni says the decision was not influenced by old Joe, the pink underwear fetishist. Rather, he said the decision comes because he felt the open space tent cities were too comfortable for the prisoners, and he would rather they sit in closed jail cells. Arpaio opened the tent cities in 1993 with a capacity of 2,000 prisoners, most being low-level offenders. The tent city was deemed inadequate by Amnesty International in 1997 when they released the report mentioning the 145-degree conditions. In response to that report, Arpaio told the inmates to stop complaining about the heat. And where is Arpaio now? He's facing 6 months in jail for disobeying a court order to stop his racist immigration patrols. Karma has a lovely way of working out, doesn't it? Officials have left one lonely tent sitting in the back of the city, which is occupied by Arpaio, who says he's not leaving. When attempting to get him to leave, Arpaio tried to bite an officer who said the tent smelled like rotten meat and stagnant gas. Ugh. Arizona is looking to ease FDA regulations on what prescription drugs can be used for. The law will allow drugs to be used for ailments different than what the drug was designed for. The state legislature approved House Bill 2382 unanimously, and Governor Doug Ducey signed it into law on March 21st. Ducey said that the law would allow drug and medical device companies to, quote, engage in the truthful promotion of their products to medical professionals. Currently, pharmaceutical companies are forbidden from promoting drugs beyond their approved uses according to FDA rules. But doctors are allowed to prescribe drugs off-label for ailments other than what the drug is intended for. These types of prescriptions account for about 20% of all drug sales, with the percentage even higher when it comes to cancer care. The Arizona law would allow drug company reps the ability to share information with doctors that is, quote, not misleading, not contrary to fact, and consistent with generally accepted scientific principles. This means that drug reps can now advise a doctor to prescribe a drug for other ailments. Representative Phil Lovas, a Republican of Peoria, introduced the bill at the request of the Goldwater Institute, a libertarian think tank. Lovas says that the law is a good idea because the practice of off-label prescriptions is already happening, and the only thing illegal was drug companies talking to doctors. However, some think that the law won't have teeth because drug companies still have to answer to the FDA and are bound by federal law to a degree. Some think that drug companies will be reluctant to talk about off-label uses for their drugs for fear of fines and costly lawsuits. Since 2004, more than 30 pharmaceutical companies have spent billions to settle False Claims Act lawsuits involving off-label drug promotion. One example is Insys Therapeutics, based in Chandler, who faced state and federal investigations for its off-label sales of Subsys, which is made from the strong opiate fentanyl. A group of former Insys executives and managers were arrested and charged with conspiracy to defraud health insurers and bribing doctors to prescribe Subsys. But we're sure Insys will do the right thing from now on, right? Speaking of Insys Therapeutics, the company might have something to do with why that weed you're smoking right now is not legal. The pharmaceutical company reportedly spent $500,000 to block Proposition 205, which would have legalized marijuana in Arizona, the only state that didn't get a legalization law passed in the 2016 election. But the motive of Insys was revealed when, 5 months later, the company got approval to develop their own version of synthetic marijuana. The move has caused concern among legalization advocates who see a future where giant pharmaceutical firms like Insys will control the market. Dr. Gina Berman, the medical director of the Giving Tree Wellness Center in Phoenix, says that her small business could never fight big pharma and that she doesn't have a lot of hope for the, quote, little guy. While pharmaceutical firms have long been opposed to legalizing marijuana, the Insys move signals a new tactic of directly competing with small marijuana growers. On March 23rd, Insys received approval to develop Syndros, a cannabinoid designed to treat chemotherapy patients who struggle with nausea and AIDS patients suffering from weight loss. Critics of Insys say that the firm also develops fentanyl, an opiate that is 50 times stronger than heroin and was the reason for the Insys scandal last year. In an investor filing this year, Insys directly admitted that legal marijuana could, quote, significantly limit the commercial success of their cannabis products. JP Holyoke said that their strategy appears to rely on the FDA for, quote, monopolistic protections, which is why they want to keep marijuana illegal. Insys is developing a host of new synthetic drugs that will hit the market next year. The company is now looking to its next lobbying efforts, which hope to make it illegal to use Tylenol, drink ginger ale, give back rubs, and wish someone good luck. On a lighter and fluffier note, a dog in the Phoenix area found its way onto a list of 15 dogs awarded for their extraordinary impact on people's lives. Bliss, a golden Labrador, was selected by Milkbone for her service to a Phoenix middle schooler who is confined to a wheelchair. Bliss is able to pick up dropped items, keep her safe at school, grab cell phones, and open doors. And of course, most importantly, Bliss is an expert cuddler. Bliss is a top graduate of the Canine Assistance School, which trains high-functioning service dogs and which has paired over 2,000 dogs with people across the country. Congratulations, Bliss, you are officially a good girl. To celebrate her award, Bliss hunkered down with a big bowl of pepperoni, then fell asleep for 3 hours after an epic belly rub. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about the program you're watching right now. Here at 5 on 20, we are undertaking a new kind of citizen journalism. We're going to give you the news as we see it. And we want more people to speak up with us. We need writers, hosts, anchors, camera people, sound people, the whole gamut. The times require a new way of informing ourselves. So join us. Do it. Do it now. Email us at info@creativetucson.org to get involved. And if you think there's a story we're missing, a person we should interview, an upcoming event we should cover, or have any news tips for us, shoot an email to info@creativetucson.org. We are here for you, and we want to cover all stories from all points of views, so don't be strangers. Now in national and international news. Officials in Lithuania claim that Russia is trying to create an alternate history in order to deny the Baltic states' right to exist. Russia's effort parallels that of the invasion of Crimea, when Russian officials and media began claiming that Crimea was never its own state and that it belonged to Russia. Lithuania's defense minister, Raimundas Karoblis, said that, quote, Russia is a threat, and that Russia is claiming the Lithuanian capital, Vilnius, doesn't belong to the country because it was occupied by Poland between the First and Second World Wars. Army officials in the country are taking the disinformation campaigns very seriously and think that Russia is trying to destabilize the region. They say that Duma politicians, along with the state TV network Sputnik, are spreading the disinformation. Along with the Vilnius claims, Russian reports have claimed that Klaipėda, Lithuania's third largest city, never belonged to Lithuania because it was a gift from Stalin after World War II. Army officials fear that Russia's attempt to rewrite history are part of a possible future ground attack. According to Ukrainian army officials, Russia organized the same kind of disinfo campaign for 12 years before the invasion. They see the same pattern forming with Lithuania. In responding to Russia's campaign, Germany is leading a group of 1,000 troops, including soldiers from the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, and Luxembourg, who will be stationed in Lithuania. Another NATO group made up of American, Canadian, and British soldiers are stationed in nearby Poland, Estonia, and Latvia in case tensions increase. Putin is doubling down on his disinformation campaign, claiming that Russians discovered America years before Christopher Columbus, so the U.S. actually belongs to Russia. He also claimed that Jesus, of New Testament fame, was actually Russian, therefore the sins of man were forgiven because of Russia, which Putin says deserves at least a huge thank you. A recent study showed that giving driver's licenses to undocumented individuals makes the roads safer. Researchers at Stanford University studied the effects of a 2013 California law that granted licenses to undocumented immigrants. They found that hit-and-run accidents decreased by 7 to 10% in 2015, which meant 4,000 fewer accidents. This was the first in-depth study of the effectiveness of these types of laws. This runs counter to the claim that giving driver's licenses to people here illegally would make the roads more dangerous. This idea usually comes from the faulty logic that undocumented immigrants are more prone to violence, which our president may have fomented. The study comes a month after Attorney General Jeff Sessions launched a threat against sanctuary cities, many of which offer driver's licenses to its undocumented populations. Recent research has also shown that sanctuary cities are also safer than those who strictly enforce immigration laws. Researchers think this is because people in sanctuary cities are less afraid to report crimes when they don't face the threat of deportation. The authors of the Stanford study point to a similar reasoning. They say that undocumented immigrants with licenses are less likely to flee the scene of an accident. 12 states and Washington, D.C. currently issue licenses to undocumented immigrants. The issue has been debated for years in Arizona, where Dreamers can get licenses, but no other undocumented immigrants can. However, Arizona and Nebraska were the only two states who tried to deny Dreamers the right to a license. Former Arizona Governor Jan Brewer argued that they should not be given a license, but was overruled by a federal court. She argued that this was a violation of states' rights at the time. However, she now argues against states' rights when it comes to states opting out of enforcing immigration laws. Funny how that works out, isn't it? A bipartisan bill running through the Senate seeks to end the practice of warrantless searches of electronic devices at airports. The legislation was introduced by Democratic Senator Ron Wyden and Republican Rand Paul, who opposed the Custom and Border Protection's practice of searching devices when travelers re-enter the U.S. The Protecting Data at the Border Act points to the 2004 Supreme Court case Riley versus California, where the court ruled that law enforcement needed a warrant to search a suspect's electronic device. A similar bill was introduced in the House by Democrats Adam Smith and Jared Polis, along with the Republican Blake Farenthold. They also mentioned the Riley case as being the precedent for the law. In a statement, Wyden said that, quote, America's constitutional rights shouldn't disappear at the border. He also said that the bill would make sure that, quote, border agents are focused on criminals and terrorists instead of wasting their time thumbing through innocent Americans' photos and other data. In March, an NBC News investigation found 25 incidences of U.S. citizens having to turn over their phones and passwords to a border patrol. One of these was a NASA scientist who had his phone taken for half an hour by border agents before it was returned to him with no explanation. The Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that the Trump administration is considering requiring that foreigners submit their social media passwords, phone contacts, and other information if they hope to enter the U.S. If the rule passes, Trump will be able to tweet disparaging remarks at Rosie O'Donnell from foreigners' Twitter accounts to make it seem like the world hates her. Well, it looks like the staff of the Trump administration are cokeheads after all. Operatives from the myriad groups run by the infamous Koch brothers are filling top White House positions, according to recently released ethics forms. The billionaire Koch brothers are known for their libertarian views and using their fortune to fund a complex network of special interest groups to advance their agenda. Since they made their money with oil refinery, they naturally want to roll back any and all environmental regulations. And you have to admit they're doing a pretty damn good job. The forms revealed Koch connections such as Mark Short, who was named chief liaison to Congress and who formerly led the Koch-backed Freedom Partners Chamber of Commerce. The group was a dark money nonprofit used by the Kochs to secretly distribute money to their various allied groups. Freedom Partners was in charge of doling out $750 million in the last election to federal and state races. Other examples include Donald McGahn, Trump's campaign attorney and now White House counsel, who represented a range of Koch groups focused on the election, including Freedom Partners. McGahn's chief of staff, Ann Donaldson, also represented Koch-backed organizations. And we can't forget Miss Alternative Facts herself, Kellyanne Conway, who consulted last year for Americans for Prosperity, one of the Koch's biggest groups. Conway also served as a board member of the Koch-backed Independent Women's Forum, whose goal is to, quote, increase the number of women who value free markets and personal liberty. These connections counter the claims that the Koch brothers sat out the last election because of their distaste for Donald Trump. Rather, it appears that they focused their money mostly on local races until Trump won, which is when they attached their tentacles to the White House. After Trump's win, Freedom Partners Vice President Andy Koenig said he hoped that Trump would walk into the White House with an eraser to wipe out as many of Obama's environmental regulations as possible. To help Trump along, Freedom Partners created the Roadmap to Repeal, a memo that prioritized the different programs and rules that needed to be reversed. So far, it's worked like a charm. Oh, and by the way, Koenig is now working in the White House as a policy assistant. How do you like them apples? An influential scientist who studied the effects of air pollution says that the repeal of the EPA's climate change plan could cost thousands of lives. Douglas Dockery, a scientist and chairman of the Harvard School of Public Health, says that the Clean Power Plan would reduce the amount of smog and soot in the air. Dockery's studies have shown that smog and soot contribute to asthma attacks, heart attacks, and other illnesses. According to the EPA, the Clean Power Plan would have prevented 3,600 premature deaths, 1,700 heart attacks, 90,000 asthma attacks, and 300,000 missed days of school and work per year. Last week, the Trump administration ordered that the Clean Power Plan be reviewed and possibly eliminated. Trump said that the plan had a negative effect on job growth, particularly in areas that depend on coal mining, who overwhelmingly voted for Agent Orange in November. But Dockery says that these same people suffer from health issues resulting from living near coal-fired power plants. Current EPA Director Scott Pruitt supports getting rid of the Clean Power Plan. When asked about the health effects of such a move, he avoided the question and instead focused on job growth. It's worth mentioning that Pruitt was cozy with fossil fuel companies while he was the Attorney General of Oklahoma. Pruitt was forced to turn over thousands of emails, which showed his constant interaction with the state's oil, gas, and coal companies. He said that as much as we want to see progress made with clean air and clean water, the agency needs to focus on increasing jobs, which apparently can't be done without destroying the environment. Remember that story about solar power job growth at the beginning of the show? Pruitt must not have read that report. Dockery says that this thinking will only lead to a health emergency for the nation. His studies from 1993 were the first to show the connection between air pollution and premature death. He studied the residents of Steubenville, Ohio, which had the dirtiest air in the U.S. at the time. He found that the residents were 26% more likely to die prematurely than the citizens of Portage, Wisconsin, the city with the cleanest air. Another recent study found that people over the age of 65 and living in low-income communities were most vulnerable to air pollution and most likely to die prematurely. Lucky for Trump, they won't be around to vote him out in 2020. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price reportedly helped the pharmaceutical industry while buying drug stocks on the same day. ProPublica reported that Price intervened to stop a rule that would have hurt drug profits and driven down share prices when he was a Georgia congressman. Last year, Price bought shares in pharmaceutical firms such as Eli Lilly, Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, McKesson, Pfizer, and Biogen. On the same day of the purchases, Price's aide sent an email to health officials announcing that Price would address his concerns about the rule known as Medicare Part D payment model. Price denied knowledge of the stock trades and claims that it was his broker's decision, a claim he made during his confirmation hearings. Also in March, ProPublica reported that Price's stock trades were being investigated by Preet Bharara, who was fired by the president last month in a Justice Department purge. This was Luke Goodhart for 5 on 20 News. Normally at this time, I'd be introducing Sophie Gibson-Rush's segment Strong Sound, but because she's such a badass and will be co-hosting KXCI's Locals Only radio show, she will no longer be a part of our Wednesday night team. You can catch her live Monday nights at 9 p.m. on KXCI Tucson 91.3 FM and right here on Creative Tucson Channel 20. Now, to ease the pain of the loss of my Wednesday night comrades, here's a soothing video from the Desert Museum about springtime blooms in the Sonoran Desert. Good night, Tucson.
Have you ever heard someone tell you that the desert has no color? Many people have a misconception that when they hear the word desert, they think of sand dunes, no color, lifeless, nothing. The Sonoran Desert is named one of the lushest deserts in the world.
I mean, the Sonoran Desert is the lushest desert in the world.
And you have color everywhere you look. Pinks, purples, yellows, and tons of green.
A lot of people don't actually associate flowers with cacti, but as you can see in my background, there is a lot of color. My favorite thing about the cactus garden is just seeing people's reaction and their enjoyment of it.
What is a typical reaction you'll see from people?
People in awe, like that they're kind of like in alien world, but somehow it's a little familiar with all this color.
I think it's beautiful. Even more so than when you're just hiking in the desert. Maybe it's because everything's so well cared for, but there's colors everywhere. The blue, the yellow, the pinks, really make it more lively.
March is about a good time to start seeing a lot of our native wildflowers blooming. You can see that there's Perry's penstemon behind me. There's also a lot of the purple verbena.
So make sure to come out to the Desert Museum this weekend and discover the wildflower in you. Maybe make a pollinator friend or two.